The house perpetually exuded an unsettling silence in the moments leading up to the arrival of guests. Excessively pristine. Excessively ready. It felt as though I was striving to captivate someone whose opinion should have held no weight in my heart. On that particular day, I found myself tidying the guest room not once but 3 times over. Not due to its uncleanliness, yet my restlessness prevented me from finding peace. He was returning. My stepson. Following a span of 7 years. Now a man stands before us. I found myself lost, unable to recognize who he had become. Yet the memory of the boy he once was lingered in my mind, and I recalled the manner in which he would gaze at me. Not in the way a child gazes upon an adult, yet akin to an individual striving to grasp a concept shrouded in secrecy. I am in my 41st year of life, bound in matrimony to a man I once cherished. At this moment I find myself enamored with his routines, his unwavering consistency, his steadfastness. Yet what of love? That's a sentiment I hadn't experienced in my heart for years. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Claire. My home is nestled in the picturesque landscape of Vermont. My husband's name is Richard. He practices law. Rational. Perpetually strategizing, envisioning the path that lies beyond the immediate horizon. Perpetually gentle, yet perpetually aloof. We refrain from engaging in disputes. Laughter eludes us. We refrain from physical contact. We stand alongside one another, akin to bookends on a shelf. It was at the age of 10 that our paths first crossed, and I met Thomas, a contemplative youth with earnest, penetrating gaze. He made his way there each summer following Richard's initial divorce. He exhibited a courteous demeanor. Acute. Yet, what has consistently captivated my attention? It was remarkable how attentive he was to me. From a young age, he had a keen eye for detail. Should I alter my hairstyle? Should I appear weary? In the stillness of the night, I found myself weeping in solitude within the confines of the kitchen, the clock striking 2 in the morning. I quickly brushed away my tears, ensuring no one would notice. He observed. Times I found him observing me, with a gaze that held just a heartbeat longer than necessary. In that moment I attributed it to his age, his bewilderment, his deep yearning for a maternal presence, perhaps, his fascination with the essence of womanhood. Yet there exists a stirring within me. Preserved those glances in the recesses of memory. At this moment, he had reached the age of 22, recently graduated from college. Richard extended an invitation for him to stay for a few months as he navigated his circumstances. He acquiesced. And then in an instant, the house that had once been enveloped in silence was once more brimming. His voice reached me before his presence did. It delved further, increased assurance, ever recognizable. As I entered the foyer, he pivoted in my direction and smiled. Yet, it was not the grin of a young lad encountering a stepmother. It was the grin of a gentleman, gazing upon a woman who lingered in his memory. He referred to me as Claire. Never stepmom. Never mother. Only Claire. It was as if he intended to maintain a protective barrier between us. Yet it seemed he did not. He glided through the house as if it were his rightful domain. And I loathed the heightened consciousness I developed regarding my own body. Whenever he entered the space, the cool touch of hardwood beneath my bare feet, the silhouette of my hips illuminated by the kitchen light, the way my robe embraced me after a shower, I despised the realization that he was aware of my awareness. Yet I found myself unable to cease. And even more troubling, I was reluctant to do so. 3 weeks after his arrival, we found ourselves in solitude. Richard found himself on a business trip far from home. The hour was late. A tempest approached. The light wavered momentarily. I brewed a cup of tea. Thomas volunteered to ignite the flames. We settled onto the rug, engaging in conversation.
Concerning existence.
Regarding the extent of transformation that had occurred. He gazed at me for an extended moment, then spoke. Your scent lingers just as it always has. My heart came to a standstill. Could you clarify what you mean? I inquired. He gave a nonchalant shrug. As comforting as warm linen. Moreover, there was another aspiration that once filled my dreams. Stillness. Weighty. Perilous. Then he rose to his feet, gazed down upon me, and murmured, "Sleep well, Claire." He refrained from making contact with me. Yet a fire within me was already igniting. Closing voice gently lowers to a whisper. On that particular night, once he retired for the night, for hours I found myself wide awake. The tempest raging beyond my window paled in comparison to the turmoil brewing within my soul. For I was aware. A journey had begun. A whisper of stillness. A gradual unfolding. An act beyond undoing. Sleep eluded me. His voice echoed in my mind. "Your scent lingers just as it always has." That sentence echoed in my mind like an unending melody. It was more than merely his words. The way he expressed it was everything. As if it held greater significance. As if it had been a thought lingering in his mind for years. As I stepped into the kitchen the following morning, he was already present. Without a shirt. Brewing a cup of coffee. He cast his gaze in my direction. I find no astonishment in this revelation. As if he had been anticipating this moment. "Good morning, Claire," he greeted her. "Everything is in order." Yet there was an undeniable sense of intimacy woven into every aspect of it. 2 days later, I found myself stretching toward a bowl perched on the top shelf. The latter lost its grip. I lost my equilibrium, and he seized me. Entire physique. Heart to heart. Fingers gripping my waist with certainty. It ought to have been inconsequential. Simply an instinctive response. Yet neither of us stirred. Our gazes intertwined. My breath caught in my throat. I experienced it deeply. He certainly did. The atmosphere was laden with an unmistakable tension. His hands lingered, reluctant to release their grip. And when they finally did, he allowed them to slip away from me, just a heartbeat too long. He offered no apology. I failed to express my gratitude. We simply turned and left. Yet a change had occurred. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I indulged in a lengthy soak in the bath. I was taken aback to find him at home. I ventured into the hallway, clad solely in a robe. And there he appeared, ascending the stairs. We stood still, caught in the moment. I might have turned. He had the option to avert his gaze. Yet neither of us took that step. He maintained his hold on my gaze. Not with aggression. Yet there was a lingering hunger that sent a shiver across my skin. Then a smile graced his lips. Gentle. Somewhat regretful. "You seem transformed this evening," he remarked. I ought to have spoken up. Everything. Yet all I did was draw my robe closer. Not to conceal. Yet to maintain my composure. The event unfolded in the corridor. He strode by, the gap between us slender and fleeting. And our fingers brushed against one another. Not a coincidence. Merely sufficient to ignite. Just enough to halt my steps. I glanced over at him. He forged ahead, never glancing back. Yet I noticed the tension in his jaw as it tightened. That was precisely the information I sought. That night slumber eluded me. I filled a glass with rich, red wine and settled into the warmth of the flickering fireplace. Then I heard him descending the stairs. He remained silent. Simply took a seat next to me. The flames danced before our eyes. Quiet. Fluctuating. Appreciate our moderation. Then in a gentle whisper, he inquired, "Did I conjure that moment earlier?" My gaze fell upon him. My throat feels constricted. "No, irraplia. You truly didn't." He shut his eyes, surrendering to the darkness behind his lids. As he parted his lips, a soft whisper escaped. "Then instruct me to cease." "I won't if you don't." I ought to have declined. One ought to have stood firm. Departed quietly. He was known as Richard. Departed from the dwelling. Everything. Yet, in contrast, I inclined my body forward. He did as well. As our lips finally touched, it was not akin to a kiss. It resembled a door slowly creaking open. Measured, intentional taboo. We withdrew. Silence speaks volumes. Just breathe. Nothing but flames. He rose to his feet. Before ascending the stairs, he cast a glance over his shoulder. "Sleep well, Claire." It marked the beginning of something beautiful, the first kiss. Not the final chapter. It was the instant that fractured the continuum of existence. Prior to, And then, in the aftermath, for once you step beyond that boundary, regardless of how softly, you will never be the same again. Many believe that affairs unfold swiftly, disorderly, unexpected. Ours was a different story altogether. The pace was languid. Silence enveloped the surroundings. It was meticulous. Initially at the outset. It transpired 2 days later. As I busied myself in the kitchen, he entered, the warmth of the stove contrasting with the chill of the outside world. He rested against the counter, his gaze fixed on me. I requested that he hand me the wine bottle, and at that moment, he held on tightly. Our fingers brushed against one another. We both came to a halt. He advanced a step nearer, until our forms were nearly intertwined. He murmured, "It lingers in my thoughts unceasing." I did not feign ignorance. We had shed all pretense. I declared, "In that case, refrain." He pressed his lips against mine. This occasion calls for an extended duration, profound, without a moment's doubt, free from remorse. Not at this moment. That kiss transformed into a fleeting moment. Then came, third, subtle caresses linger in the corridor. Subsequent murmurs followed the evening meal, and in due course, we pressed on undeterred. The tale began with the quiet hours of the night, when Richard found himself toiling away long after the sun had set. In the quiet hours of dawn, he would lace up his shoes and set out for his morning jogs. At midday, when the house lay silent and deserted, we mastered the art of timing. Amidst the stillness, across the dinner table their eyes met. I loathed the simplicity that had taken hold. How familiar it felt to turn against the man to whom I once pledged my allegiance. Yet, with each brush of Thomas's hand against my skin, I experienced the essence of womanhood once more. Longed for, vibrant, authentic. On a particular afternoon, we departed from the confines of our home completely. He remarked, "Let us not merely seize fleeting instances. Let us indulge in a full hour." We arrived at a motel located 10 miles distant. Chamber 104. He removed my clothing with deliberate slowness, as if he had been anticipating this moment since the age of 16. Time seemed to stretch unhurried and calm, without a hint of embarrassment. Simply let go. In the aftermath we reclined in bed. He gently traced circles on my back with his fingers. I inquired of him, "What is our purpose?" With a warm smile he remarked, "A sentiment that truly resonates with authenticity." I couldn't help but appreciate the irony. All was as it should be, until it ceased to be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Richard inquired, "Have you observed the silence that has enveloped Thomas recently?" I stood still, caught in a moment of disbelief, compelled to chuckle. Dated. He is 22. That has become their identity now. Richard inclined his head in acknowledgement. Yet, his gaze remained fixed upon me, merely a heartbeat beyond the moment. In that moment I sensed it, the fissure. Petite. Hardly discernible. Yet it existed. Once a fissure appears in a falsehood, flourishes. He began to exhibit a sense of possessiveness. Envious. He was displeased whenever I chose to spend time with Richard. I wasn't fond of the way I was dressed for dinner. I found it displeasing when I expressed my refusal. He remarked, "You belong to me in his absence. Why is it that you cannot belong to me when he does?" It was then that the memory struck me. He was a man unconfined by boundaries. He was a boy who had never encountered a refusal from anyone who truly meant it, and I found myself beginning to lose control. On a Sunday afternoon, as I tended to the laundry, the rhythmic hum of the machine filled the air. As Thomas entered the room, he leaned in and pressed his lips against mine. The sound of the front door opening went unnoticed by us. I failed to hear Richard's call for me. It was only when he found himself in the hallway. 5 seconds earlier, he would have noticed it. We withdrew. Out of breath, Thomas slipped out through the back door. I remained rooted in place, trembling. And for the first time since this all commenced, a sense of fear enveloped me, unfazed by the prospect of discovery, yet fearful of the person I might transform into, a person unwilling to cease. We have crossed the threshold. Subsequently, we established our camp on the opposite side. Established a life in that place. An untrue statement. Perilous entity. I repeatedly reassured myself that I had the power to quit. I would cease. One day. Yet, the reality? I didn't know there's a look a man gives you when he senses that something is amiss. Yet, he remains oblivious to the truth. And that gaze is more daunting than a confession. It conveys a singular message. He observes intently. He is attuned to the sounds around him. And the walls are growing ever more fragile, as if I could break through at any moment. Richard had never been one to succumb to jealousy. Always the unyielding partner. Yet that month, he began to observe every detail. He posed inquiries.
Pure sales.
What kept you out for so long? Did Thomas mention his whereabouts? Am I the only one who feels that the atmosphere in the house has been charged lately? He refrained from stating it outright. Yet there was something amiss in his tone. He was not making any accusations. He was on the hunt. We gathered around the table. Richard, Thomas, myself, Basta, crimson elixir, softly flickering light.
À picturesque tableau.
A falsehood. Thomas averted his gaze from Richard. Richard's gaze lingered on Thomas's hands, and I attempted to inhale as if I were not submerged in despair. As the dinner progressed, Richard inquired, "So, Thomas, are you seeing anyone?" Thomas sputtered slightly on his beverage. He coughed, then cast a glance in my direction. "No," he replied. "Not quite." Richard wore a smile. A constricted, arid entity, and spoke. Unusual. Stillness. Not a single piece of silverware stirred. As the night deepened, Richard entered the bedroom. The door was closed. I settled onto the edge of the bed. "I am not foolish, Claire." His voice resonated softly. Regulated. "There's a disturbance in the air. I remain uncertain about what lies ahead. Yet I shall." I attempted to feign ignorance. Attempted to convey that he was caught in a web of overanalysis. He rose to his feet, fixed his gaze upon me for what felt like an eternity, and finally spoke. "Should you choose to deceive me, just don't add insult to injury while you're at it." He exited the room, leaving behind an air of silence. And I understood. He was aware. In the days that followed, Thomas underwent a transformation. He descended into recklessness. Filled with unease. Furious. "I can't endure this any longer," he declared. "Your husband observes me with keen intensity. I am not a mere teenager." He began to exert pressure, advocating for an extension, seeking clarity. "Do you truly love me?" he inquired one evening. I hesitated before responding. The reality was intricate. The reality was harsh. "I'm not sure," I murmured. He gazed at me as if I had delivered a sharp slap across his face. On a fateful night, Richard failed to return home. No text. No call received. In the quiet of the kitchen, I held a glass of wine. Thomas walked back and forth, lost in thought. As the front door creaked open at last, Richard crossed the threshold. He cast his gaze upon the two of us. Me draped in my robe. Thomas devoid of his shirt. Uncomfortably near. Excessively motionless. Richard remained silent. He merely gazed. Upon me. At Thomas. In the void that lies between us. The realm that once lay hidden, but now radiated with the intensity of a spotlight. He ascended the staircase. Not a solitary word. The following morning, Richard departed for work. Failed to press their lips against my cheek. Did not cast a glance in my direction. I summoned Thomas to the kitchen. I conveyed to him that it was time to put an end to it. "It has gone too far," I remarked. "This cannot continue." His eyes brimmed with an emotion I had yet to encounter. It is not love. Not rage. Yet the sting of betrayal. "Is he the one you're selecting?" he inquired. "No," I replied. I refused to lose myself any deeper. It resonated with a volume that eclipsed even the most piercing of cries. That marked the dawn of the conclusion. Of all things, we had been tainted by the deceit. The blaze that once enveloped us in warmth had transformed into mere wisps of smoke. Constricting, gasping. What truly stung was not the fact that I was discovered. I could no longer recognize the woman who had done this. Myself. Affairs shatter the very foundation of trust. They shatter the cadence, stillness, ritual. They shatter the image of the self you once believed to be true, and depart from a figure you scarcely know. This is what endures. I could no longer maintain the facade. The dawn following Richard's return, when he laid eyes upon us, I revealed it all to him, not in wrath, calm and composed, yet in utter excruciating truthfulness. I positioned myself opposite him at the kitchen table, and uttered the words I believed would shatter his world. Indeed it is. His hands remained still. His gaze remained unwavering. He merely murmured, "For how long?" "A single year." That shattered him. He remained silent. Nothing was thrown. He merely stood there, strolled toward the staircase, filled a bag. Just before he stepped out, he turned to me and remarked, "You might have shared with me your feelings of loneliness. You didn't need to ignite the flames of destruction in our existence." The door shut quietly behind her, and with it, the final chapter of the woman I once was. Thomas yearned to remain. He mentioned the possibility of creating something together. "No more hiding," he declared. "Shame shall no longer hold sway." Yet my heart did not hold love for him. Not in the manner you anticipate. Not in a manner that endures the scrutiny of daylight. He embodied longing. He embodied validation. He was fleeing. Yet he was not destined to be my future. I conveyed that to him. He reacted poorly. "You have destroyed my father. You have shattered my very essence. And now you wish to depart as if it never held significance?" "No," I replied. "I am turning away because it has." Richard initiated the process of divorce. Thomas has departed from his residence. And I found myself within the confines of the house. A dwelling that abruptly resonated with the remnants of all I had shattered. I returned to therapy. Authentic healing. Not driven by passion. Yet, for the purpose of accounting, I traversed the familiar corridors I had once navigated with the utmost caution. Seated at the very table where 3 souls once gathered for a meal, and tallied each silence I once overlooked. A letter was penned to Richard. Not to seek absolution, yet to reveal to him my true identity. Underneath the deception, I did not send it. I came to a profound realization. He had no use for my truth. His need for my absence was palpable. This tale does not revolve around love. It transcends mere desire. It is a tale of the unfolding events. When a woman craves attention so desperately, she accepts it from a source she should have never engaged with. It concerns the unfolding events. When longing transforms into a sense of self, and how treachery does not begin with the flesh, yet with each yes we softly utter, when we ought to have declined. As you tune into this pondering, it could never be I. Exercise caution, for I have uttered those very words before. This moment, I dwell in the quietude of 2 men who cherished me, until I offered them nothing more to cherish.